about a woman whose son was murdered, and she completely forgave the murderer of her son and welcomed him into her home. I'm Emma. Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Feel good?
Yeah.
Hi. As you might tell, I'm a little bit hoarse. So I've got my honey and lemon and my water, so hopefully, we'll get through. If I start literally screeching out, then just encourage me, because I'm doing my best to try and speak to you today. Thanks. Let's go. So I'm Emma. I'm married to Ben, who was cajoning before. We lead Soul City Church. We've been going for about 6 months here, and it's just been an incredible journey, and God's so good. And we're really excited that you're here today. Again, if it's your first time, you're so welcome. It's so great to see you. And if you've been many, many times, then obviously we love you so much, and it's great to see you here as well. So I'm going to start by reading from Matthew. If you've got Bibles on your phones, it's Matthew 18. Or if you've got, obviously, a physical Bible, then that's very good as well. Well done. So it's Matthew 18:21. Okay. Then Peter came to him, that's Jesus, and asked, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, so his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, 'Please be patient with me, and I will pay it all.' Then his master was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s, and he grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little more time. 'Be patient with me and I will pay it,' he pleaded. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, 'You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you?' Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he could pay his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart." Wow. Stupid. Right, so as you might have guessed from the passage and the video, we're going to be looking at forgiveness today, and I'm aware it's an emotional and a kind of a deep subject, so I just really encourage you to have your hearts open, your ears listening, and just ready to kind of see if God's saying anything through me or just directly to you himself today. So feel free to to agree if you agree, and just really just examine what it is, if there's something that God wants to do in your life today. So we've got a garage that's just around the corner from our house, and we went in a few years back. We've lived in Stockport for about 9 years now, and we went in, and there was it was in the summer, and Ben went to go and get his bike out, and then suddenly there was this giant swarm of bees that just came in and attacked him. And so obviously rammed it shut, like, not going to get the bike out today. And literally we were then like, oh man, what do we do? Like, there's bees, they've made a home in our garage, and we now can't get in because we're wusses. And so what we did was we just shut it and said, okay, we'll deal with it later, and hope that they go away. And surprisingly, they didn't, and they actually multiplied. So the queen bee got very busy, and there was then more and more bees when we came around the next year. So then we were like, okay, I know what we'll do. We'll call the bee people. There's bee people, they'll sort it out. And we called them, and they said, no, bees are protected, and we cannot move them. We will not fumigate because you're not allowed, so you're just going to have to leave them. And I'm like, what? Like, you can't even take them somewhere? And no. So we tried to get someone else to deal with it. They wouldn't deal with it. So then again, we closed the garage door. And then the next year came round, and we were like, okay, we're going to have to do something about these bees, because it's like in the summer we can't use our garage. And we realised that they were actually living in this installation that builders had helpfully put in there 2 years before. And so please don't tell the bee people, okay? If there's any bee people watching, I'm sorry. So what Ben decided to do was he put on some big gloves and a bit of a mask across his face, and he cleared out the installation, took it to the tip. And they can have a nice home there and have a great time. I'm really sorry, bee people. But it was a bit of a, kind of when I was thinking about forgiveness, it was just something that stood out to me as something that we can do. We can end up ignoring it, getting someone else to deal with it. Yeah. And it was only when we actually deal with it ourselves that it then it is no longer an issue that's breeding and growing in our lives. So in this passage, it's talking about 70 times 7, and some translations say 7 times 7, 70 times 7. But I think the point is that it's not a numbers issue. It's not a counting numbers of how often I should forgive someone. But when God talks about it, when Jesus is talking about how often we should forgive, it's actually a heart issue. Yeah. And it's something that we should walk day by day by day. And minute by minute, sometimes it feels like second by second in forgiveness. And in the Jewish tradition, the people that Jesus was talking to at the time, they believed that it was 3 times that you should forgive someone. Yeah. So for Peter, his disciple, to say, I'm going to forgive 7 times, he probably would have thought, I'm awesome. Like, this is me being really holy, really cool. Like, I'm going to get some points here because I said 7 times, and that's more than double what the tradition was. And actually Jesus was like, no, it's more than that. It's so much more. It's every minute, it's every day, it's walking in this. Jensen Franklin says, forgiveness isn't about keeping score, it's about losing count.
Wow. That's so good.
I'll say that again. Forgiveness isn't about keeping score, it's about losing count. And our world lives in so much opposition to this. It's karma, baby. It's you do for me and I'll do for you, and you hurt me and I'll hurt you. And like when we keep score, when relationships keep score of each other, everyone loses. Yeah. We can't win against pain. You can't fight against fight because you just like. If you literally punch someone, you're just going to punch them to death because you can't win. Someone has to give up. Someone has to say enough is enough, and choose to apologise and choose to forgive. So in this parable, it talks about a king and a servant, and Jesus would tell parables. They were stories to try and help explain to the people in that context what it was that he was talking about. So in that day, they had kings and they had servants, and so he would use this example to explain about forgiveness. And in the parable, you can see the intense contrast between the king and his servant, because he went and he said, I'm so sorry, and will you forgive this debt? And he just completely wrote it off. He was going to send him away for the punishment that he deserved. He owed him debt and he couldn't pay it. So in that day and in that law, what you would do is you would send that person to prison because you couldn't pay it back. And so they would have to send, and he was like, and your wife and your kids, and the crazy thing is, for that amount of money, there's no way a servant would ever be able to pay that back. Yeah. So that's a life sentence for this whole family, and you still would never be able to pay it back. And the crazy thing is that was written off. It was fully written off for him and for his family and for his children and his children's children. They did not have to pay that debt. But then he goes to a servant, a colleague, a friend, a family member, whatever it is that you could apply it to. And he decided to not extend that same forgiveness to him for a menial amount, like an amount that could be paid back, that you could say, okay, yeah, I'll give you more time, or I'll write that off because it's been so written off for me. And he couldn't pass it on. He refused to pass it on. And so he then, people spoke, and they passed it on to the king, and the king said, hey, that's not cool. Like, you can't do that. So because you refuse to then pass on the forgiveness that I so bountifully, immeasurably, incredibly laid out for you, there's going to be consequence, because you can't. It will end up entrapping you. It will end up enslaving you, because you're holding on to something that was freely given to you and not extending it to someone else. I overheard a conversation this week in my office, and it was a lady who runs a CAP centre that's Christian, Christians Against Poverty. It's a debt support agency, and she had the amazing privilege of calling someone to say your debt is paid, like it's written off.
Wow.
You have worked hard, and you've done these steps to pay off your financial debt, and I've got the privilege of calling you today to say that it's done. And I was just like, like hearing this conversation, like how amazing that must be to hear that there's thousands and thousands of pounds that you owe being completely written off. Wow. And yet because it was all paid and she'd done the work. But actually this is even more amazing, because not only it's not just paying it back bit by bit, but it's actually being completely written off, undeserved, and freely extended.
Wow.
And God's forgiveness is like that. It's always within our reach. It's always there for us, and no matter what we've done, no matter where we've been, no matter the things that we've thought, said, felt, done, who we've hurt, anything like that, it is always available for us. Jesus won forgiveness for us at the cross, and it's available to everyone at any moment in time, regardless of situation. And later, if that's the first time you've heard that, or if something is stirring in you today and that's something that you'd like to respond to, God's love and forgiveness today, then there's going to be opportunity later to be able to do that. But I'd just like to explore a little bit about forgiveness and what for us as Christians that looks like, and what that means for us in our lives. And a guy called Erwin McManus, who leads a church in LA, says, to receive forgiveness cannot be our ultimate end. When we are genuinely grateful for forgiveness given us, we will in turn extend grace and forgiveness to others. This is what it means to live in grace, to live in an unending stream of forgiveness. Grace both receives and gives forgiveness without measure. To receive the grace of God and yet treat others ungraciously is an act of wickedness. No matter how much we are required to forgive in others, it pales in comparison to what God has forgiven in relationship to us. Now, forgiveness isn't optional. It's not optional. It's something that we're required to do, and it's something that is transformational in our lives, and it actually is something that once done and once repeated and once walked through can have incredible implications on our lives and what that actually really looks like. It's a life or death matter. It's a heart matter. It's a soul matter. And when you walk in unforgiveness, because that is what you're doing, if you're choosing to not walk in forgiveness and you're walking in unforgiveness, then it's going to come out. The servants in the story saw the unforgiveness that the master showed. It wasn't a hidden thing. They saw it and then went and spoke to the king about it. And the unforgiveness can come out in different ways in your life. Yeah. It doesn't. It's not an emotion. It's not just a nice thing to do. Or I heard a Taylor Swift song the other day. I do love Taylor Swift. But I heard one of her songs the other day was saying, and I forgive you, and haha, like that would be nice, wouldn't it? And it's like, no, it's not just that it's a nice thing to do, and you say to your kids, hug and make up. It's like it's so integral to our lives, and they say that to live in unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Wow.
It's is literally like taking something that you're like, I've got something against you, this is going to hurt you, and actually it's just going to rot you away on the inside, because it can't just be left with them. And some people can genuinely walk around and they've done something and they've got no clue. They've got no clue what's happened. They've got no clue how you've hurt them, how they've hurt you, and they're having a happy, jolly time of it. Or there can be situations where you have felt pain and you've gone and approached that person and said, you've hurt me, and this is hard, and then they're like, okay. And they're not apologetic, and they don't want to recognise that there's something that they've done that's hurt you, and so they're unrepentant in that. And then in both of those situations, you're left with this stuff, and you're left with this pain and with this difficulty that you've been through, and yet they're fine. Like, I mean, obviously there's going to be some kind of repercussions for them as they go on, but actually in that moment you're still left with this stuff, and it's what you choose to do with that stuff that's really, really important. Yeah. So I know in my life I've said and I've done daft things, and there's probably people in this room who I love very much who I've hurt, and things that I've said and done and haven't said and done, and I have some amazing people in my life that if I've done those things will come to me and will say, hey, I wasn't okay. Yeah. And initially, like, I don't like criticism. I don't like feeling like someone thinks I'm bad or that I've done something wrong, and I'm sure there's lots of people like that. And initially I was like, oh, like, why are you telling me that? But after a while I was like, no, I want to know. So if there's anyone here who I've hurt or I've upset, please come and speak to me about it, because I want to know, and I want to learn, and I want to grow, and I want to develop, and I want to become more and more like Jesus every day. So if there's things that aren't like that, then please do go and speak to someone. Do go and tell them, because if they're walking with the Lord and they're taking those steps of growing closer to God, then they're going to want that, and it might not be easy to receive, but it's so healthy. Yeah. And relationships grow so much healthier when we're honest and when we're open to receive criticism as well, and in love, truth in love. Yeah. It's not like, people, if you've got no relationship with them, you're like, meh. But actually, truth in love is so powerful.
It's good, Emma.
So good. Come on.
I think also there's times when I'll hold stuff in. I don't want to offend you. I've been hurt, and I'm just not going to talk to you about it, because actually I'll just deal with it. Yeah. I'll separately deal with this stuff, and I don't want that person to feel bad, so they don't know, it's okay, I'll just deal with it and move on. And that's what I've done a lot in my life, and I've kind of not then approached people, and actually it just sits in me, and they're not able to grow, I'm not able to grow, and it just sits and it stews. Matthew 18:15 says, if your fellow believer sins against you, you must go to that one privately and attempt to resolve the matter. If he responds, your relationship is restored, not destroyed. That would be bad. If he responds badly, then But I totally understand sometimes private forgiveness is needed. Yeah. And there are times and there are situations where actually it might be a dangerous situation. Or it might be something that has happened, or even someone's passed away, and you can't literally go and speak to that person, or a violent situation or things like that. And I'm not saying that you should at all, and definitely go and speak to that. And sometimes private forgiveness and that personal reflection and giving that up to God is totally right. So please hear that as well. But the other thing that it says in that is also. In that Matthew passage about if your fellow believer sins against you, and what it's talking about is people who are following Jesus, people who are walking with Jesus, and we can't expect people that aren't walking with Jesus to understand in the same way every time why forgiveness is so important. And I'm not saying people don't understand forgiveness, not in the church, but actually the level of forgiveness that we're talking about here is a spiritual matter, and so don't necessarily expect that someone will get it and will understand if they're not walking with God, and be praying for them, be telling them how much God loves them, even though it hurts, because it's so important. So there's different ways that unforgiveness can come out. It doesn't just affect your emotions. It doesn't just affect your mind. It actually affects. It can affect. There's been proven studies where people that are holding on to unforgiveness it can literally physically cripple you.
That's right.
It can physically affect your mental health, affect your physical health, how you wake up in the morning, how you go to sleep at night. Do you go to sleep at night? Are you struggling with remembering things and feeling pain and the difficulties that you've experienced in your life that you're holding on to will actually physically have an effect on your life? And there's been stories where people have then released their forgiveness to someone and they've physically straightened up.
Wow.
They've been on a process of actually physically healing, and where some mental health issues and anxieties and all those things have actually begun a process of healing, because it doesn't just affect your mind and your heart, it actually affects your body. Holding on to unforgiveness can also affect your emotional health. It can affect the way that you see other people. It affects your other relationships. It affects your trust for someone. You know, if you've been through something that's painful, you're less than likely when you come into another relationship with someone to be as trusting, because you've been hurt. And you know, maybe if I put myself in that position, are they going to do that to me as well?
Yeah.
And so we put barriers up. We put things between us and that person, because we can't. It might affect the way you love people or the way that you receive love, and it can also create masks and create facades and create. So you can either completely retreat from people and say, you know, I'm going to put this up because I don't want to be hurt, or you can do everything's okay, I'm fine, don't worry about me, I'm fine, and actually inside it's all knotting up, and you can't actually be yourself, because you're actually pretending everything's okay, whereas actually something inside you is hurting. But the most dangerous way is actually our spiritual health.
Yeah.
Because if you're holding on to unforgiveness, then it's like the barrier I was talking about. You're actually putting a barrier between you and God. Because God is love. God is forgiveness.
Yeah.
God gave everything. He sent his son to die on the cross for you, to extend forgiveness to you. And when we choose to live in unforgiveness, we're putting that person or that thing or that situation between us and God.
Wow.
We're saying this is more important.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not moving forward towards you because there's this thing that I can't let go of. There's this thing that I'm holding on to. Like it talks about nursing a grudge.
Wow.
You know, if you actually think about the implications of what that term means.
Yeah.
Nursing a grudge. It's like a mum holding her child tightly because you don't want to let go.
Wow.
And you're putting that between you and your Heavenly Father, who loves you. And
Wow.
the amazing thing is that he doesn't move.
Yeah.
He doesn't move. He is there. He is always there. But what we do is we take steps back. Just little steps. It's really easy to take a little step back. But over time, as you take those steps back, what you're doing is you're creating distance.
Wow.
So if you're wondering why you don't feel close to God today, if you're wondering why you don't feel like you're hearing God, maybe just examine if there's something that God's saying to you, if there's a situation or a person or something something that's happened that you're holding on to and that you can't let go of. But he's asking you today to be able to let go of that. And we're going to be looking at that in a moment.
Come on, Emma.
But I just, yeah. God's good. But I also want to make sure you guys know that this isn't your fight.
Yeah.
So God has won.
Yeah.
God has conquered sin. He's conquered pain. He's conquered death.
Yeah.
He's risen and is seated in a heavenly place and is with us as
Yeah.
well. Like, the crazy thing is, he's not just some guy with a big beard in heaven Like, I appreciate beards. Like, I do. My husband, as referenced earlier, has a great beard. But he's not some old guy who has who wants no relationship with us. He's not some being who just goes, just sends out lightning bolts every now and again. He's a God who loves us. And he's a God who is powerful. And he's a God who can completely transform any situation and work it for his good. Like the Bible says that for those that love God, he turns around situations for good.
Yes.
And the rubbish and the crap that you've been through and that you've experienced can give, like, it sounds mad. And there's probably situations you're thinking of and you just think, how can that be good?
Yeah.
How can you work good through that situation?
Yeah.
But give it to him and watch what he'll do with it.
Yeah, so good.
He's just incredible.
So good.
Psalm 7:16 says, "For you, God, will see to it that every pit digger who works to trap and harm others will be trapped and harmed by his own treachery. But I will give my thanks to you, Lord, for you make everything right in the end. I will sing my praise to the God of the highest place."
Yeah.
So don't get down in that pit.
Yeah. Come on.
Don't get down in that pit, in that rubbish, with that situation. Like, God says he's got it,
Yeah.
and he loves you, and he won't let stuff stay hidden. He will bring stuff, but it's not up to you. It's not up to us to be digging that pit with that person, with that situation, because he has won it. He'll honour you, and he'll bring you up.
Yeah.
But don't go down there. It's a messy place.
That's good.
Like, pits are not nice, and they're hard to get out of.
Wow.
Yeah.
So don't go there.
It's not
So
fun.
good.
So I'm going to invite my beautiful friend Lauren, who is going to come up. And Lauren is a wonderful member of Soul City. And Lauren's got an incredible story. And when I was praying about this, just really said to Lauren, would she come and share? Because God was really speaking to me about Lauren's story. So, all right? Good. Go, Lauren.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren. Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
Hey. Yeah, so I